Not every period of exhaustion is burnout. And I think it's important that you can tell the difference because knowing the difference between whether you're burned out or you just simply need a break can make a world of difference in deciding what actions you need to take in order to relieve yourself from the exhaustion or from the symptoms of burnout. So, in this video, I just want to talk about what the difference between the two of those things are based upon my experience and offer some insight onto what may need to occur in order for you to remedy whether you're just needing a simple break or if you're actually experiencing burnout, what that means going forward. So, the first thing that I wanted to talk about is what needing a break actually looks like. And that is really dependent upon like a person's situation. But ultimately, what I believe is that if you just are tired, you're just exhausted, maybe, and this is all related to work per se, or, it could be work and life, stuff, but more so pertaining to work, right? If you're generally happy with your job, you know what I mean, you enjoy what you do, you are able to still, function normally on the job without having to do any additional like mental gymnastics or anything like that to kind of keep your head in the game. And you ultimately you generally, still think of what you do for work positively, then you might just be tired. You might just be tired and or even exhausted and you just need a break. And a break in this sense would be just like a nice vacation or just some time off, maybe to spend time with your family. And it could be for a short amount of time or an extended amount of time. But ultimately, the biggest indicator is how you feel once you return to work. So if you left, if you left on a good note and you take your break and you come back on a good note, then that's all it was. You just really just needed some time to rest and recoup and recover from maybe just an extended period of working really hard, right? But if you may leave work on a not so good note, right? Maybe feeling a bit indifferent or detached or just not really feeling too great about what you do, and you think it's just because you're tired, maybe a little bit stressed out, and you take a break for however long and you come back still feeling that way, then that could be an indication that what you're experiencing is burnout as opposed to just simply needing to take a break. So, but I think, ultimately, how you feel when you return is a really big indication. At least that's how it was for me. In my experience with my most recent experience with burnout, I ended up taking two different trips for a couple of weeks at a time. And I still came back feeling, not great about my job, about my work situation. And my overall mood was it just never changed. And so once I kind of realized that, now while I was away, it was great. I was able to rest, you know what I mean? And, just take my mind off of work and stuff. But it was just like, as soon as I got back, everything that I was experiencing came rushing came rushing back. And that, for me, that was a big indicator that maybe this is a little bit deeper than me just, working hard. It's maybe this is exactly burnout, along with just specifics about, my overall mood changing, my physical health deteriorating, sleep patterns changing, like the whole nine. So, but in regards to this specific topic, for me, just feeling the same way and possibly worse at times once I return from taking a break. So that's what, needing a break ultimately would look like. The biggest indicator for that is how you feel once you return, right? The next thing I want to talk about is what burnout actually looks like. So we talked about what, needing a break looks like, but what does burnout actually look like? And I kind of alluded to it, at least for what my experience with it is basically, it's just like, no matter how many times you try to take a break, maybe the first time you take a break is for a week, and then you come back and you just feel like, you still feel like crap, right? And I'm generalizing that term, but ultimately, yeah, you do. You don't feel good about what you're doing at work. Your mood changes for the worse. You're still you know, dreading Mondays, you know what I mean? And you're just maybe feeling a little bit detached, right? It could be a number of different things. And you may take a break, take a little short vacation. Maybe you take a week off, right? You've been saving up your PTO days, right? Your vacation days. And you take that first vacation and you come back and you still feel like crap. And so then you convince yourself, okay, maybe I just need a little bit more time. So you plan your next, vacation, and this time you stay away for 2 weeks, right? And you come back and you still feel the same, right? So when that's happening, when you taking breaks, to try to relieve yourself from the stress that you're feeling and things from work, but it doesn't change, that's a good indication that you're burned out. And that's literally exactly what I dealt with myself. Okay. Like, I kept trying to take trips and just take time off, to just thinking that I was just exhausted, like that I just needed a break. And, just trying to take gradually more and more time off, when ultimately that wasn't, it was the issue was deeper. And a lot of the times with burnout, it's more so because you're not aligned with what you really ultimately would like to be doing. And I'm talking about, as far as your career is concerned. And I think that's one of the reasons why, high performing, women particularly, experience burnout, because you're just working so hard for something that ultimately, you don't really want to do, but for whatever reason, one reason or another, the stability, the good salary, nice position, you know what I mean? It's just affording you to be able to live a nice life. And so you just continue with it, although ultimately it doesn't align with your goals and your values, right? So those are just some indications that, you might be experiencing burnout. And that's what it would kind of look like. It's just, you feel indifferent. You're not passionate about what you do. I mean, the list is long, and ultimately what it means, like, to sum up the point, is you no longer enjoy what you're doing, even though, on paper everything looks great, you know what I mean? But you're just not feeling it. You're not feeling it. And no matter how many trips and vacations you take, you still come back and you still feel the same way. That's an indication of burnout, right? And the thing about that is that when you are dealing with burnout, it's definitely it's going to take more than just taking a simple vacation, or just taking a career break. It can include taking a career break, but that's not it. Like, when you're dealing with burnout, you really have to do a little bit of soul searching. I know it sounds super cliche, but like, real talk, like, you have to figure out what the cause of the burnout is, like what specifically is the cause. And then figure out how can you change it, to how can you change your situation, in order to really be able to remedy yourself, alleviate yourself from those symptoms of burnout. Because at the end of the day, until you get to the root of the problem, and for a lot of people, like especially when it comes to career, it's just because you're doing something that you really don't desire to do. Like, you know what I mean? It's just you're just not aligned. And that just makes it tough when, you're just kind of going through the motions, but you're just not aligned with what you really, really would want to be doing. It just makes it tough, it just makes it tough to keep going. And a lot of times we find ourselves on autopilot just because it's what we know, you know what I mean? But in any event, that's what burnout can look like. Again, a slew of other things. This is really honestly just speaking from my own personal experience, dealing with burnout and having dealt with burnout for twice now in my career. The first time I had no idea that that's what I was dealing with. But this time around, I was able to recall, a lot of the same feelings that I had years ago. The first time that I kind of experienced burnout, and I was able to identify it, as such and act accordingly, right? So again, these are really just speaking from my own experience and what my perspective on it is. Okay, so it's not official, medical advice or anything like that. Okay. So how do you tell the difference? Again, it kind of goes back to once you take a break, right? Whether you think you are just exhausted, tired from working hard, or burnout, and I think honestly, a lot of people kind of conflate the two or just kind of use them interchangeably when ultimately it's really not the same thing. And the biggest indication is what I kind of mentioned before is how, like once you take a break, right? Because you're most likely going to take a break regardless of if you're just tired or if you're actually experiencing burnout, not realizing that burnout takes a little bit more than just taking a break. But again, the biggest indication for that is how do you feel when you return? Do you feel completely restored, rested, and rejuvenated, and you're ready to jump back in to doing what you love doing, right? Then you were just tired. You just needed a break. But if you feeling exhausted mentally, emotionally, just overwhelmed, exhausted, anxious, all the things, right? And you think, you know what, let me just take a nice long vacation, and you go all out 3 weeks, right? Come back, you still feel all the same negative feelings, before you left. That's burnout, and that's how you tell the difference. And yeah, the biggest indicator for you is after you take that break, how do you feel when you return, right? Because I think with burnout, it's just so much deeper. Like I mentioned, it's more of an alignment issue as opposed to just being, tired from working hard, right? And when it comes to like things like alignment and just with your lifestyle and your values and your goals and stuff, those those kind of situations are what calls for actually making big changes in your lifestyle to fit, more of what you want, you know. So, yeah, that's how you tell the difference. And kind of alluded to this, like how people kind of interchange the two. They might be exhausted, but they might refer to it as burnout, but they still think it's the same thing. Like they think that just being really tired just means you're burned out, right? Especially when it comes to high performing women, especially women. because we are conditioned to just push through all the time, regardless of how we feel, right? Just push through, just get to the next, whatever the next thing is, right? Project, milestone, goal, insert whatever thing that needs to get done, right? And we're kind of conditioned to just setting aside how we feel ultimately just to get the job done. And I think that because we have a tendency to kind of ignore, we might acknowledge it, but also don't act upon it. Like we still kind of just put it, we might acknowledge how we're feeling and we know that we don't feel really good, but we just, you know what I mean? Oh, well, I'm just tired. Let me just go ahead and get this done and then I'll take a break, right? Let me get this next thing done and then I'll rest, right? And I just think that that's one of the reasons why, high performing women, especially why we confuse the two, because we are just conditioned to just set our feelings aside and just keep pushing through without really acknowledging what the deeper cause or issue may actually be, right? Because with both, you're going to be exhausted, right? With the burnout, usually tends to be a few different, indicators, right? And again, going back to how do you feel after you take a break is a good way to know if you may be dealing with burnout, right? So lastly, what I wanted to talk about is just what do you do once you know what you're dealing with? And I kind of already alluded to this, but just to kind of bring the point home is, if you just needed a break, you just needed a break. There's nothing more that you need to do, especially if you take the break, you get your rest in, you come back feeling refreshed and rejuvenated and ready to get back to it. Boom, problem solved, right? Next time you get tired like that, take a nice little vacation. You can come back, and get back into it. But when you kind of identify that you may actually be dealing with burnout, it just goes back to now, instead of just taking a break for like a week or two, we might be talking months. We could be talking 6+ months. We could be talking a year. It just depends. It just depends on the person's situation and the extent of the burnout they're experiencing. But a lot of the times, like, I don't want to say a lot of the times, but the first time I actually dealt with burnout, it took me over a year to kind of like fully feel completely restored, like on all cylinders, to actually have the all of the motivation and drive to like be ready to jump back into work. And I mean, when I did, I really did. Like once I was like, all right, boom, I think I'm good to go. All right, I'm ready to get back into the ring. You know what I mean? And I mean, but everybody's, situation is different. And that was the first time around. I don't know that this time around may be that long, because I was able to kind of, I was able to identify some of the things, like some of the, burnout red flags a little bit earlier on, and was able to begin to kind of prepare for it a bit earlier on and actually have like a plan set out and, really still allowing myself time, but also managing, exactly how to navigate it and come out on the other side and actually understand, like doing that work that I was talking about, just figuring out what the cause of it is. First time around, I didn't really do any of that. I just stopped. I just was like, you know what? I need a break from work. I'm taking a break from work. And that's really what it was. And I'm not really doing the deep work, not really, trying to really identify. I just thought I was just tired, just tired of, just needing a break that ended up being a long break, but a break nonetheless. And I mean, and I, took road trips, travel overseas. I did a lot of things. I was able to just kind of breathe and relax. I did like gig work and stuff like that too, which I didn't do it the entire time, but I did. I did like gig work, even a little part-time work in between. So I didn't ever really 100% completely stop working altogether during that time, but I wasn't doing it a lot to where it was just like causing me any stress or anything at all. So that it was a little bit different, even though I had stints and periods of time where I just wasn't working at all. I still was doing a little bit of work sprinkled in between. So it was just kind of like I never really 100% just took, a complete break from working. So I still kind of, even though I took a career break, like from what I, did professionally, I was still kind of working, you know what I mean? So it was a little bit different. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was able to, take such an extended period of time off, because I was just, doing my little gig work and stuff like that just to, have a little bit of income coming in. But this time around, I'm not doing that this time around. So I'm just completely, like I said, I made a plan and saved up my little FU fund or whatever. And I'm gonna stick to my little plan, and execute that way, but really just giving myself a chance to really just not work, to completely kind of restore myself. And I'm a little bit older now. I'm not like a lot older. This happened a few years ago, but in that short amount of time, like my mindset and everything just really completely changed, like everything. Like it's something about, man, once you get in your 40s, man, like I promise you, like something just, it just, a switch or something just happens and you really start looking at the world through a different lens, whatever that lens is. Like, you know what I mean? Your tolerance for things changes, and at least in my experience, you just start seeing things for like what it really is, I think. And it just changes things. And I wasn't, at the first time around, I really wasn't, like, I still was so focused on getting back into the game. Like, I was really focused on getting back into the game. Like, okay, I took all of this time off. All right, I need to get back in the game. Not this time around. This time around, take my time, and now instead of jumping back on the hamster wheel that I was on, creating my own path, doing things more so on my own terms, So it's very different, this time around. Going back into like, knowing what to do once you identify, whether you just needed a break or if you are in fact dealing with burnout. Again, just kind of doing the deep work, taking the break, but also doing, the deep work with figuring out the root cause, what needs to change and how you're going to change it. And it's simple, but it's not easy, especially if you've been just so conditioned, like a lot of us millennials have been, to always be hardworking and being productive and all of the things, right, that we are finding out were not true. Not for everybody, but I think a lot of people are successful and happy with their lives. But for those of us who feeling like we need a career break, you know what I mean, getting to the root cause and figuring out what's up, what's really underneath that, you know what I mean? So I just wanted to Um, yeah, I just wanted to talk about that. Just knowing when, when you just need a simple break versus if you're dealing with burnout, a break is not going to be enough. You have to do a little bit of, deeper, deep diving into the cause of that. So, in any event, I will leave you with that, and just let me know if you've, dealt with burnout in the past. Did burnout or exhaustion in the past, did taking a break, a career break for however, long time, did it in fact help? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your experiences with how you overcame either just being exhausted or dealing with burnout. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.